which is over to the right of your screen. You can get to it from the bottom nav bar, and you can put questions into the chat box if you have any. And after Diana and I have conversed for a while, we're going to pop into those questions. Coyote will share them with us, and Diana and I will answer them. So please don't think we're ignoring you. We're just postponing the questions a little bit. And with that said, I think that's the main business. Oh, and stick around because we've got a special offer at the end. All right. So Dr. Diana Wiley, I have spoken to you a number of times on your radio show. You have a terrific show that covers all kinds of sex-related issues. You are a therapist in private practice. You're at askdrdiana.com. Am I right? Did I get that right?
Not quite. Go to the website. My advice website is deardrdiana.com.
Dear Dr. Diana, that's right.
Yep, that's it.
I should have written it down on a piece of paper.
That's okay.
Well, I knew you would correct me if I had gotten it wrong. And so, Diana, because you've been in the sex therapy world for quite some time, I'm sure that some of the people who are with us today know what sex therapists do, and probably some don't. Could you give us just a little background on your sex therapy journey? How long have you been doing it? What do you like about it? What are the kinds of things you focus on? And do you have any specialties?
All good questions. Thank you. Yes, I've been doing this work for about 35 years, so a long time. And I lived in California for many years. I'm now in Seattle. So I'm also a marriage and family therapist and got licensed as a marriage and family therapist back in about 1980, and then did an internship. And I just love being a sex therapist and a relationship counselor because, oh, it's so satisfying. It's so deeply satisfying to witness couples, and I see individuals too who some of them want to be in a coupleship, but it's great to see the transformation of the emotional and physical, especially the physical intimacy part, because a lot of couples have trouble with their sex lives, and it's really, really satisfying. Now, when I was much younger, even before I went to graduate school the first time, I got my master's and then later got my PhD. But so way before, I was very close to my grandmother Helen, my mother's mother, and I could talk to her about sex. And I was still in my, I think, late 20s then, and I asked her, Grandma Helen, because I knew she was sexually active. She was well into her 80s. I said, Grandma Helen, when does sexual desire end? And she kind of looked at me with a smile and a little bit of a wink, and she said, I'll let you know. So my Grandma Helen was an amazing woman, and she's one of the reasons that I decided to specialize in aging and sexuality. And in the early 90s, Dr. Walter Bortz, I lived in Palo Alto at the time, and I did 2 different studies on aging and sexuality. And so they were later published in medical journals. So I also get to call myself a gerontologist. And I want to share with you a particular time that is related to good vibrations. In about 1992, after one of my workshops with Dr. Bortz, I had in my own office, I had a group of older ladies, I'd say late 50s and 60s, and some in their early 70s. And they were all these women had come out of the senior center at Palo Alto and were part of my research with Dr. Bortz. They came for a group meeting in my office in December of 1992, and I'll never forget, because they left, it was about this time of the year in 1992, and they all left giggling and happy because they were going to make a field trip to Good Vibrations in San Francisco, and they were going to get toys for themselves and for some of their friends. So I go back, I remember Joni Blank, of course I go way back with you, Carol Queen. I think Good Vibrations is an amazing store, and as is Babeland, and I know you're kind of one and the same. So that's a little bit about my background and my specialty and maybe you can tell I'm really enthusiastic about the field.
Well, I don't think any of us would want to go to a sex therapist who didn't have some positivity and enjoyment about the possibility of getting more sexually comfortable. So you exude that, Dr. Diana. And now you've written this book. And I want to say, when I read the book, I felt as though, even though it's about being quarantined together, it very much references the time in which we're living right now. It also really struck me that everybody in a partnership probably ought to read it. It's a short course in sex therapy, among other things. But
Yes.
I'm sure that you've been floating around with the idea of putting your wisdom in a book for a while. What really spurred you? What got you going? And what do you think people really need right now in this corona moment that is so stressful for so many people?
Well, I'll deal with your first question first. And so in early March, my husband Brian, who helped me immensely with the book, and Carol, you know Brian, he's just a great guy, and he has lots of words of wisdom like sex is fun, free, and the fountain of youth. And he has another thing that really pleases me a lot because I'm the recipient. And this is under one of our rules for sensational sex, which is put your partner's pleasure first. So he says, worship your woman and the goddess will reward you. So, but going back to early March, so the two of us said, okay, I was hearing from, I had to switch to Zoom right away and not see clients in person anymore. So I began to see that lots of my clients were really getting stressed out about the lockdown and being quarantined and experiencing too much of each other all the time. And so I've been wanting to write a book forever. And so now seemed to be the right moment to do just that. And I want to back up just a little bit because I didn't talk about my parents, and that really gave me such, sorry about the sirens, since I live close to a fire station. My parents were really powerful and passionate role models for me. And my father and mother gave us the facts of life. This was in the 50s when still parents don't often give sex education to their kids.
Right.
But they were such affectionate parents, and so I never had shame or anxiety about my own sexuality, and that's very unusual. So I've been sex positive forever. So that's reflected in my book, and there are lots and lots of other guidelines. So I'm hearing a little extra sound. Is that okay? It's all right. I guess the show must go on, right?
I think there was a slight glitch, but you sound great now.
Diana, we're having a little trouble hearing you right now.
Oh, you're having trouble hearing me?
Now I heard.
You know, I have all this.
If you want to just.
I have a theater background, and I've always been told I project well. So let's. How's the volume now?
I think it was a Zoom glitch, and now we hear you just fine. It's very clear now.
Okay. So, yes. So the spark that led to writing the book that I wanted to write for so many years was the quarantine, and I had. We wrote it. Because Brian helped me so much, my husband. We were able to write the book in a little more than 2 months, and that's impressive. And
that is.
Yeah. And a lot of people have benefited from it. There are so many chapters that can be useful and exercises that can be useful for couples in quarantine. And let's see, your other question, Carol.
What's the range of impacts that you see the quarantine and corona fear having on people that you see in your practice?
Well, a lot of them are getting depressed. and they might have been prone to depression before coronavirus, but now if that was true, they're even more likely to get depressed. So depression and anxiety, and it can be overwhelming. And then, having seen each other too much. In my long-term marriages, and maybe one person has retired, so they're already kind of used to, or both have retired, they're kind of used to both being around each other a lot. Despite one wife who was new to this, this is pre-pandemic, she said, I married you for better or for worse, but not for lunch every day. So that's an example of too much togetherness when the relationship isn't really vital and enthusiastic and the communication isn't good. So we have all the stress about the pandemic, and it's a relief now that we have vaccines that are here now, but it's going to be a while. We must continue to wear our masks and do social distancing and not host large gatherings. We must do that. It would be terrible to get COVID now when we're so close to the end. But it's likely with Christmas coming up and New Year's that people will just disregard. So the best thing is to quarantine with your partner. If you're lucky enough to have a partner, we'll talk a little bit about being single in this time, perhaps, especially if we have a question that comes up. But if you're lucky enough to have a partner, isn't it just wonderful to take advantage of it? You know each other, and I have lots of ways in the book to jumpstart a relationship, like get to know your partner better. And in that chapter, the first chapter, there's a sex menu exercise, lots of choices for what to do sexually, that you want to be the giver or the receiver, or maybe you don't want to do it at all. So this prompts a lot of communication. It can prompt communication between the two people who haven't really talked about sex much. Lots of people have so much trouble talking about sex. So certainly getting to know your partner better. And then the second chapter, planning a date night at home. And I'll stop there, Carol, because you might have some additional specific questions.
Well, I'm really struck by, you acknowledge depression and anxiety and worry and all of that, but I'm so struck by the tack that you take in helping people is to help them unpack the possibility in the relationship that they have, the sexuality that they have, even if they're solo, their sexuality. I'm sure that
Yes.
that's one of the insights that you have for a single person. And we'll get to that. We'll talk some more about that. But I'm so struck by how positive, and this is an opportunity for you to make your situation better. That imbues your book. It's not a, oh, these are scary times kind of a book in its overarching feel. Of course you acknowledge that, but you take us past that into another level of possibility. And I just love to hear your thoughts on how this whole scenario that we're living through now is an opportunity for growth. I'm not going to use any offensive language like silver linings. That's not the right way to think about all of this. This is a terrible time. And
Terrible time, yeah.
those of us who have the opportunity and the privilege to have some time together to work on our relationships, what kind of growth do you hope to see in people who can come to the table to do that kind of work together?
Well, the growth really is all about more and better and deeper communication, because they do need to get to know each other better. And it is an opportunity when you're spending so much time with your partner. And if a couple can suspend or put aside their differences, their conflicts, and decide that they're going to take some baby steps to get closer. And this is, I guide my clients to do this, to for instance, chapter 4 is about touch, using touch to help with stress, and full body caressing, sometimes called sensate focus, can be very useful, where intercourse isn't even on the table for stage 1 and 2 of this. Lots of touching. And so if a couple can relax more and do more touching, backing up, they might take a shower together so that they're extra clean and relaxed. Most of us have much better sex when we're relaxed. So there are ways to increase and better the communication with some guidelines, and they're in my book, Love in the Time of Corona, Advice from a Sex Therapist for Couples in Quarantine. They're all there. Because a lot of couples do need help. They're just stuck, and they're depressed, and they're stressed. And I think that's it. And there's so many ways to get out of it, and that's what we're talking about.
When we think of couples being together, we think of them being each other's support system, right? Mm-hmm. That isn't always how it feels, depending on how the relationship is, but that's one of the reasons I think that people are drawn to be in relationship in the first place. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on how we can take care of each other during this time, especially for those people who haven't, who've been basically swept along by their lives and haven't really thought in those terms, who maybe haven't been great communicators. How do we know what we need in these times?
Well, it's a good thing to do to first sit down with yourself and think about, what do I really need for myself and for my relationship? What do I really need? Maybe write it down and ask your partner to do the same thing. Talk about things that you like having in your life, things you don't like having in your life. See if you can't reframe the don'ts. And then you should also talk about choices you have. And maybe write all of that down first and then get together. And it should be a real heartfelt conversation where, and you of course want to have privacy. Now, if a couple has children, there are some more challenges. And we can get into what to do if you have children, but I'll stay with this now, to the couple and re-engaging and embracing and saying, one person perhaps says, I have felt so sad or so frustrated or whatever, using iMessages, that we haven't been able to be closer during this pandemic. And what I know as a therapist is that it's much easier to do the work than it is to remain in a sexless marriage or partnership. It's much easier to do the work, and especially once you get started. And of course, seeing a sex therapist can facilitate that journey a lot. And some people could benefit from seeing a lot of people could benefit from seeing a sex therapist. ASECT, American Association for Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, ASECT, AASECT.org, has a wonderful website where you can plug in your town and your state and find sex therapists in your area. And, and I'm seeing people on Zoom, and I have a few openings. I saw a couple in Germany last month for a while. And I saw a guy, pretty soon I'll see his wife too, in New Jersey. So this whole field is expanding a lot by being able to see people via Zoom or some other telecommunications device.
Right. I think it would be worth letting our listeners know right now because we're talking about sex therapy, we're talking about ASECT, and I just think it's worth letting people know that average therapists, people, marriage and family therapists, a therapist that you might find who's licensed, who's a terrific therapist, it's very possible that that person hasn't gotten extra information about sexuality. We sort of assume, I think, that these specialists that we turn to when we're worried about things in our lives, doctors, therapists, and so forth, have the training to be able to know what it is that we're worried about and to help. And a sensible and compassionate therapist is better than no therapist at all when you have a sexual issue. But many of those folks don't have the training that sex therapists have. And if sexuality or an issue with sexuality is part of what somebody is confronting, really sex therapy is the way to go, I would say. And I would imagine that you agree with me.
Yeah, I do get referrals from marriage and family therapists, for example, who don't have training in sex therapy, because sex inevitably comes up in a couple's relationship. And so, and then, you know, in medical school, sex education and looking at human sexuality isn't given much time. So, and then you have doctors, I'm going to pick on doctors for a moment, who often feel very uncomfortable talking about sex.
Right.
And so you need to find a specialist. I think the asec.org is a very good way to find help. And it does, you know, sex therapy doesn't have to be long-term. It can be just 3 months or maybe less, at once a week or once every 2 weeks. And pretty much cognitive behavioral therapy is the way most sex therapists go. Is you have to change how you think, because some people think I'm not worthy of having a better life, that sort of negative talk, and change how you think, and including myths about sexuality that might have come from your family of origin, and then change your behaviors. And we know that consistent, positive, well, in the case of sex behaviors, well, you do enough of those, and then eventually your attitude starts to change. And those are baby steps. Those are baby steps. And then the attitude changes. That's another reason I love being a sex therapist. I give homework, and then I get to hear in the next session if they did their homework, and if they didn't, why not? And then I get to explore the resistance. But most couples do it. And then we talk about what went right and what went wrong. And I'm not there, so I have to be, as a good sex therapist, a little bit of a voyeur. You know,
Right.
Tell me what worked. Tell me what didn't work, and let's tweak it if necessary.
And of course, most people aren't really trained to, encouraged to, modeled to be really frank about sexual communication. That's one of the challenges with communication-based problems, is that so many of us don't really think we should say the whole sentence about our pleasure, about our desire, about our reactions to our partner's experience, all of that. So I'm so glad that communication is such a central part of what you teach and talk about, because that really is, for so many people, exactly where it starts.
Exactly. And of course, if you don't have role models for this, and you know, I'm so grateful that I had the parents that I had, because most people that I see and most people that I know did not have any sex education from their parents, and they may have experienced sexual trauma or sexual abuse. I co-led 2 women's groups in when I was in Palo Alto for 8 years with Dr. Maria Flaherty, and all of these women had been sexually abused and had trauma, and consequently they were not having orgasms. And because to reach orgasm, you have to be truly in the moment and feel safe with your partner and let go. And that is often a journey that you have to take if you've had bad things happen to you growing up.
And even being raised in an atmosphere where sex is considered quite shameful is,
Yes.
I think many people think of that as a norm that they manage to escape somehow, but it's a trauma scenario of its own. So that too needs to be unpacked sometimes. Well, we talked about taking care of each other. I asked you about that.
Oh, yes.
How about taking care of one's self? And I don't just mean via solo pleasure, although we can talk about that too, because that
Yeah,
is a kind of self-care, isn't it?
absolutely. Yes, taking care of oneself and masturbating to orgasm. Yeah, there are so many people that can masturbate to orgasm using a vibrator. By the way, I have to tell you this. Before I moved, after I lived in Hawaii, I lived in California, then I lived in Hawaii, and then I lived in Los Angeles. And when I was in Los Angeles, I worked at UCLA's Female Sexual Medicine Center. And what we found there was that women who had not masturbated as teenagers or up to the age of about 25, uh, probably they weren't having orgasms, and they needed a vibrator, which would go 300 times faster than any finger or tongue, if you're with partner's sex, that could go. And so probably it's because those neural pathways from the genitals or from the brain to the genitals were not laid down. So a vibrator can get them going.
Mhm.
And when you have an orgasm, or plural, orgasms, it's so good for your well-being and for your stress and for your anxiety and for your immune system. Now we're talking about in self-care, and that's part of self-care. And if you're lucky enough to have a partner, you can do this with your partner. But you can get some of the benefits even alone for your immune system. There is a, DHEA is produced with frequent sex, and DHEA can help with your immune system, and also IgA is brought down. IgA is increased for your immune system, and so there are lots in the cardiovascular benefits, the exercise. There are lots and lots of benefits for having sex. Health benefits. You can reduce your stress. And that's so important. And it's also good for your skin. Somebody did a study where they looked at slides of people, and doctors and nurses were supposed to guess how old the people were. The people that were having regular sex and regular orgasms often looked younger, and the nurses and doctors looking at these slides thought that they were 10 to 15 years younger. I'm well into my 70s, and one reason I think I look younger than besides bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, but it's mostly that I have regular sex and lots of orgasms, and it's one of the best things. The joy, the absolute joy that comes, it shows in the face, and it's really my best cosmetic. And I feel so good. I'm so sex positive, and I wanted to share this with everybody in the book, and you'll find it there with lots of ways to jumpstart. Like, I suggest that a couple, when maybe they're both working from home but in different parts of the house, when they see each other again, they need to give each other a 7-second kiss and a 15-second hug. That's long enough to get the oxytocin going. And then to sit down and maybe do some eye gazing. And that can really improve the intimacy. Really look into your partner's soul with your eyes. And so those are ways to reconnect. And so many people need ways to reconnect because they're just stuck and they're depressed and they're not happy.
I know when I wrote Exhibitionism for the Shy, and I was doing my book tour and my promo about Exhibitionism for the Shy all those years ago when I wrote that book, I got pushback about one thing that I think is so interesting, and what you just said made me think of this. I got pushback about how you shouldn't have to do any preparation at all to have good sex, because good sex should be natural. It should just happen.
Yeah.
This was the generation that saw that movie Swept Away, where they were having
Right.
sex on the beach. I know that many people have tried having sex on the beach. It seems like such a good idea. Then you realize sand gets everywhere. Good heavens. But the whole idea that you might need to do some exercises, that you might need to prepare in some kind of way. The idea is this sort of romance of, I would almost call it romance of not taking any responsibility. Although, of course, that tends to put responsibility onto a person's partner if they believe that that's how it's supposed to go. You know, one of you has to reach for the other one at some point to get something going. But the idea that you could find these behaviors, these tricks and triggers and tips for things to start out, that is completely appropriate for somebody who doesn't find things revving up as much as they fantasize that should happen.
It is really, it really is a Hollywood myth that you're somehow going to just, the passion will just spontaneously appear and you will run into each other's arms. And that is a Hollywood myth. And so that's why putting sex on the calendar is the most likely way to make it happen. And so I talk about that in planning your date night at home. And Exhibitionism for the Shy, I love that book, Carol. And it's got lots of good ideas in it. I am a believer in dressing up for sex. You know, we used to talk about dressing for success. I think you should dress up and dress for sex too. Men tend to be more visual than women. And so if you dressed up in some sexy lingerie, and I do this regularly, confession, with my husband, and he likes it a lot. And it's kind of fun. It gets me in the mood, and put some music on and maybe do a little striptease. And it gets us both more into the mood. Being exhibitionistic and planning for it, and planning for maybe you have some takeout food, good takeout food that you eat at home, and you put candles out and eat, and fresh flowers, and maybe your good china, and you have a nice dinner together where you talk about your relationship. You don't talk about the kids if you have them. You don't talk about your work. You talk about your relationship, and then you can go and have a shower together, or if you have a big enough bathtub, a bubble bath together. Just is so much fun. And then you can go on and have full body caressing without intercourse. And that's all explained in Love in the Time of Corona as well. Oh, Carol, I'm not hearing you.
That's because I was muted, because I was trying to make the sirens not talk. You can hear me now, right?
I can hear you now.
All right. Oh, Zoom. Well, that is a fantastic segue into toys. You could get out the toys if you have. Get out the toys. Look, some toys. And
some toys.
Our wonderful colleague Sharon put this together just to give people just a little visual about how many different kinds of things there are that we can play with. I'm not going to even describe all these different things, although if people are curious about them and they want to put questions into the chat, please feel free to do that. But you'll see that toys are an option for changing up what you do, adding sensation, all of that. And if we go to the next slide, I think we're going to get a little mention of the kind of products that are available with CBD now. Sometimes people find that is encouraging of intimacy. It helps with anxiety for some people. Some people feel that it helps with pain issues, and they're beginning to put it into lubricants now, which is a wonderful switch that hadn't been invented just a very few years ago. And
Yes.
finally, one more screen, Lisa, if you would take us to the last toy screen. I just want to say, because we know that some people aren't quarantined together. They're sweeties, but they're apart. They may have not even seen each other since the beginning of quarantine, depending on their circumstances. That increasingly there are toys that run via app that you can gift a person, and then you can run their vibrator from afar, or even ones on the Karoo system where each of you have a sex toy and the app allows you to feel the toys doing their thing at the same time. So people shouldn't think that toys can't be part of their partnered sex life if they're far apart, because they can if desired. And I know that you talk about toys all the time with your clients and with people that you are educating. So if you have any toy insights, I'd love to hear them, Diana.
Well, yes. I mean, back when they were called Eskimos, there's a politically correct, better term now, but Eskimos, I don't remember what they're called now, but Eskimos call sex laughing time. And, sex is meant to be adult play. And we have toys, sex toys, and we can experiment with those toys, and we can be creative. Brian, my husband, does it very well. He combines oral stimulation with the use of a small vibrating toy. Oh my goodness. The combination of human stimulation and vibrations, wow. It's fantastic. And so, but it takes, then you have to get feedback from your partner, how that felt, and maybe you experiment some more, and you learn and improve. There's so many possibilities. And one of the nice things about all of this is, with any kind of new sexual behavior, you're getting shots of dopamine. Dopamine is the hormone of arousal. Dopamine needs novelty. And that's why in new relationships, you can't keep your hands off each other. There's all this dopamine because everything is new and wonderful. And so we need, if we're in a long-term relationship, we need lots of novelty. And if you want the relationship to be monogamous, and these days it's pretty complicated to open your relationship with the pandemic and quarantining and all. But anyway, so you experiment and you do all of these really fun things with your partner and get more dopamine going. Yay, dopamine. More oxytocin, touch hormone, the anti-divorce drug. More oxytocin. The more you're touched, the more you want to be touched. It's a real positive feedback loop.
A little chocolate will give you a little oxytocin, but
yeah,
lovemaking will give you an awful lot more oxytocin.
An awful lot more, yes.
And you can put the two things together. There's no rule that says you can't have chocolate while you're having sex. Of course you can.
That's true.
Of course you can.
You could even take some chocolate syrup, and especially if you put down a rubber sheet, and maybe put it on your lover's body and lick it off.
That is a classic.
Yeah, I know it's not original, but for chocolate lovers, that can be fun.
And if somebody can't have chocolate, there are other lovely things. Well,
yes.
let's see what our participants want us to expand on or to talk about. Coyote, are you going to read us out some of our questions? And I think you're on mute.
I am going to read you some questions. I'm here. So one person asks, hi, Diana. What can you recommend to couples interested in experimenting with cannabis and sex?
Oh, yeah. Cannabis and sex. Well, as a matter of fact, I have a free downloadable chapter on my advice website, deardrdiana.com, and it's all about cannabis and sex. And I have recommended, of course, in Washington State where I live and in California where you all are, and I don't know, the participants may be in various places, but in California and Washington State, cannabis is legal recreationally. And so I have recommended cannabis to select clients with great uh, reviews afterwards, where I'll have a woman who's, well, in this case, she took an edible she didn't want to smoke, but you have to, with edibles, you need to realize that you take it from a store where it's measured out and it's going to take a while for it to kick in. But anyway, this particular client said that she didn't feel inhibitions. She relaxed into it. She was able to be a little silly and have more fun with sex. And then couples that smoke together, if there's erectile dysfunction present, I've had men tell me they don't have ED anymore, and they're able to last longer. These are very good results, good outcomes. So there are lots of ways to get some cannabis in your system. And I'd recommend that people go to deardrdiana.com and download the chapter on cannabis and couples and cannabis. Yeah. And there's lots more there.
Wonderful.
Or even listen, I'll just say one more thing, Carol. Even listen to a show I did about last month with Chelsea Sabara. She was one of the developers of Velvet Swing. You may know Velvet Swing. It's got the THC and CBD in it. Yeah. And anyway, with that whole show, Brian and I both talked to her on my show, Love, Lust, and Laughter, which is on, it's archived, and you can listen to it by going to the homepage of my regular website, which is drdianawiley.com. And so you can listen to the show there, but then go to the other website to download the chapter on cannabis and sex.
Great. So the next question that a listener had was, I am not sure how to play with a toy. How much time, where? I seem to be busy holding it and feeling vibrations, and I get tired. Should I be watching something?
Carol, I can weigh in on this, but you're the real expert on toys, so why don't you start?
Well, I'll start, but I would also love to hear how you sort of introduce toy use to people that you're suggesting it to, because it's coming from two slightly different places when we do it at Good Vibes versus when you're doing it with clients.
Well,
so,
that's true.
Yeah, so what I would say is first, if you haven't chosen your toy yet, do a little research, get some information, get it from us at Good Vibrations. We've got people who can inform you. You can even make an appointment, a free appointment with educator Andy for a virtual shopping experience, and you can get sort of drill down about what it is that you might like the most. But with something like vibration causes arousal in many people, but if you don't start out aroused to begin with, bless you, Diana, if you don't start out somewhat aroused to begin with, or if you're nervous or really unaccustomed to the sensation, it isn't always something that is going to lead you immediately onto a path toward orgasm. So exploring it with it around the body, not just going right to the genitals. That's a common sex issue people find is problematic, and actually it can be problematic when you're by yourself too. You like make a beeline to the genitals and you don't arouse any more of the body or the senses. So there are a lot of different ways that could happen, but my favorite one to just think about and tell people, because it's so accessible, is that you just touch yourself in other parts of your body. Your whole skin can be erogenous. Your whole body can be a sexual zone, and just find out what you like the sensation of. When you've got the vibrator on your genitals, move it around a little bit. Don't buzz one place and just leave it there. And another way to think about doing this is moving your body with the vibration. Because just lying there, a lot it's sort of a almost an old school verbal meme that somebody says, they just lie there. Well, if you just lie there, the rest of your body doesn't get to help you get aroused, because movement can help you get more aroused. So
the movement gets the sexual energy going.
yes.
And yeah, I've had a couple of, I had one medical doctor in my practice, and she had never had an orgasm. And one of the toys that I think is especially good for somebody new to toys and maybe wanting to have an orgasm is WeVibes Touch. And it's kind of splayed. And the thing is that underneath the labia are vestibular bulbs. And when they're attached to the clitoris. And when they are filled up, those vestibular bulbs, then the arousal goes up. So vibrating on your labia and then on your clitoris and experimenting with it, it doesn't have to be the touch. There are many other toys that can do this too, but I'm just think that came to mind because my client had her very first orgasm ever. And she's a medical doctor, so she knows anatomy, but she hadn't been able to have an orgasm herself. So that the touch was good for her. And many couples do bring a small vibrator into sexual play together, or they will masturbate by themselves with a vibrator or not. Some men like it and some don't. But then you have a time where you can have mutual masturbation, where it's show and tell. You get to watch how your partner masturbates, and he or she gets to watch how you masturbate. It's very illuminating, and it can be very arousing too. Sometimes it's a bit of a hurdle for couples to get over because it's such a private activity, self-stimulation.
These days, people are doing it over Zoom, though. Maybe it feels easier to do if you're really by yourself in a room. And the other thing that I would add to what you just said, Diana, is that you know, for a person who finds that vibration is kind of just a lot, it feels odd rather than good. And sometimes that with arousal, that'll transform into feeling good.
Yeah.
Many people do find that there is pleasure to be had in vibration. There are particular nerve endings in our bodies that feel and carry the vibration signal to the brain. So it must be, we're a match, we humans, in vibration. But if you find it's too much, move the vibrator further away from the clitoris or wherever it is that you're pointing it. Give it a little distance, or even put something soft in between your body and the vibrator to diffuse the stimulation. Because for some people, if you get too small, focused, sort of pointed a toy, like the bullet vibes or the mini vibes sometimes aren't too strong for them, but they're too focused. And de-intensifying can happen if you put something in between. So that's worth a try as well.
Such good suggestions. Again, it's about being creative and experimenting, and sometimes you need a little, maybe watching a bit of porn. Most men prefer that. A lot of women prefer reading erotica, reading, to help them stay focused when they're alone and masturbating with a vibrator. Or starting out, you were talking about full body, starting out by touching, if you maybe start in the bathtub, the woman can start by touching her breasts and her arms and other parts, all these other parts, except for her genitals. And then go there, but get the rest of the body aroused.
And of course, you and I are from a generation where women were not encouraged to watch porn. There wasn't porn that was made for women's eyes, women's experience. Of course, that's a big category. Of course, I should say that. I should say as much. But and you had to be a little frisky and adventurous back in the day. Get your hands on some porn, and that is, I think, one reason why so many women would rather grab a book. It's less confrontive in that way. And my experience with younger generations is that it might be a little easier for some of the younger ones to really enjoy what porn has to offer them, but to each their own. You know, that's why there are multiple channels of erotic input. Some people will find that it's enough for them to watch informational movies or whatever about sex, not things that were meant to arouse and turn them on and get them all hot and bothered. For others, hot and bothered is where it's at. So everybody's a little different in what their own boundaries and desires sort of make the right choice for them. And you said the phrase baby steps earlier, and I use that phrase all the time in exhibitionism for the shy, because the idea that if I'm not going to be shy, I'm going to be hanging from the chandelier. I'm going to be out there. I'll have to get my own website. I got to make some porn. I got to do this. I got to do. You don't have to do anything.
That's right.
You do when you're ready to do it.
Yeah.
That's the basis of knowing yourself sexually, and you don't jump out in the middle of the ocean if you haven't had a swimming lesson. Well, maybe you do, but I hope there's a life raft right there if that's the case, because it's steps. Each one of us gets to where we are as a sexual being via taking steps. So thanks for helping me explicate those ideas, because I really think I think it's so important. I don't think so many sex positive people even have expressed that they feel pressure from partners to experience one thing or another, to enjoy things that isn't their favorite thing. And you can be as sex positive as the day is long, and it doesn't mean you like every single thing. So
exactly. And that's why the sex menu that I offer in the book and as a free download on deardrdiana.com, because you get to talk about different sexual activities and whether you want to do them or not.
Yeah.
And whether you want to be the giver or the receiver. And it's very specific. And
then that exercise again in 6 months or a year and see if what you want
exactly.
Because maybe it will. It might not.
Maybe it will.
Let's see if there are any more questions. Coyote?
There are. So I have this has a couple paragraphs, but I'll go quick. It says, when the lockdown started, I moved in with my girlfriend. We had been seeing each other for a year and then locked ourselves up together for quarantine. A month and a half ago, I moved out. We are no longer together, and I'm single again and currently starting a relationship with a new person. I shared with them that I am not comfortable engaging physically with her, and she's okay with that, and we are pursuing a distanced romance. What an experiment. I haven't done this in a while, and it is a gift to be able to get to know somebody with a built-in boundary. Do you have any advice for ways to see if we are physically, emotionally right for each other, but without holding hands?
Physically right for each other without holding hands?
Correct, because they're physically distanced, and it is in the time of corona.
Yeah.
Question that is.
Well, there's no easy solution for this, but I think doing what you can over Zoom and talking about what you really want from the other person, and you can anticipate getting together. And one advantage to the quarantine for single people, and then maybe starting up a relationship, is that courtship, that old-fashioned word, courtship, gets to be extended. You really get to know each other better. You're not going to just go have a one-night stand where you hardly know the person. You're going to have courtship. You're going to become friends first. And then think how exciting it'll be when you can actually get together safely in person and have wild, hot sex. You've had all this buildup. You've really gotten to know each other, the courtship. There are so many women who say, I want my man to slow down, do more, and care more. And that's true. Can we go on to the next question? Because I'm not so sure I can answer any more than what I just said for that.
I'm actually there's not another question. There was a clarification question that I'm answering for the person, but that is actually the last question that we have.
I want to
Okay.
say a little tiny bit about that question too, then, and then
Please do. Yes.
yeah, so two things came to me while you were talking about courtship, and of course the old-fashioned version of courtship did not include a lot of explicit talk. This is, I think, part of the idea of natural. You know, if you're meant to be together, it'll be great. And of course, many of us have had experiences where we loved somebody to bits, but it wasn't great. It wasn't, you know, there wasn't a basic compatibility. So in this modern courtship, this courtship in the time of Corona, I think that one of the things that would be extremely important would be to not keep the explicit talk for later when you can pair it with explicit acts, but get as clear and communicative about sex and desire as you possibly can as
Yes.
part of this. And that is where some of the hints about whether you're on the same wavelength will come. And the other thing just popped in my mind. Let me just tell you what it is. See if you think it resonates. There was an interesting experiment done. I don't remember if it was at the Kinsey Institute or where, but it was a few years ago when they were trying to figure out whether pheromones made any difference to humans. Of course, when you buy a pheromone at the store, it's often from pigs. So if you like bacon a whole lot better than you ever did, you'll know why. It was because of but human pheromones, if we have them, we should be able to test them by giving each other a worn t-shirt to sniff.
Oh, yes.
And it turned out that little more than you would expect from random chance, there was a result that some of the participants found that the t-shirt made a difference to them. So I would say, when are you going to be at the point in your explicit courtship distanced ritual to see whether or not you want to sniff or wear each other's worn t-shirts? Lay off the deodorant a little bit before you wear these t-shirts, just to get your human scent on it.
Yeah.
Put it in the baggie, zip it up like the sex workers mail away their panties for money, and get it home and hang out with the t-shirt for a little bit and see if it resonates with you. That's just an idea I came up with. Maybe it'll work.
I think it's an excellent idea, because I saw a couple years ago, and he had a lot of trouble with cunnilingus going down on her because he didn't like the way she smelled. So of course, being clean helps a lot, having good hygiene. And if you don't have an infection, the smell should be arousing. But it's a problem since our smell is at kind of the base of our brain, and it's pretty primitive. If we don't like how our partner smells, it's a problem.
And if we don't know like how our partner smells, the other thing to do before you really think it's a problem and start writing up the divorce papers is figure out if your partner is taking any meds that might change
That's a very good point.
Of their juices, because sometimes that is the case. I've heard this from certain antibiotics. I've heard it from somebody's had cancer treatments recently and has been
Yes.
So there are things that may make a difference. And of course, the adult industry in their infinite wisdom has thought up some tasty things to change out people's experience of taste and to some degree smell. And one of the things that barrier methods are great for is for that. There are certainly also people who really don't like the taste of their partner's cum, who use barriers for oral for that reason. And then of course there are others who love those kinds of tastes and smells. As Napoleon said to Josephine, home in 3 days, don't wash.
Don't wash. Yeah.
That might not be your thing, however, people. So in that case, get the waterproof toys, jump in the shower, wash.
Yeah.
To each their own, and we just need to find out if enough of those specifics of desire are shared with our person.
Yes,
And again, right where we started, Diana, communicating helps us figure that out, right?
it does. It does. So
Look at your book.
there's the book. Oh, I like to see that. Yes.
Absolutely. And we want to remind you that you can get Diana's book at Good Vibrations. And there it is, Love in the Time of Corona. And I'm telling you what, it's a sex therapy journey with Diana, whether you're quarantined or not. And it's a very good, it distills the wisdom of sex therapy and Diana's own charm and light touch. I just found it really impressive. So I want you to know that it's at Good Vibrations, and you can get it if you want it. You can get it for someone if you think that would be a good idea.
I think it'd be a great Christmas gift.
So do I. Or Valentine's is coming up right after that.
Valentine's too.
That's
Lots.
working in the sex business. You buy some presents, and then pretty soon it's time to buy some more.
I know. Isn't that true? Oh, and there's your book. And I love your book. And we've talked about your book on my radio show, Love, Lust, and Laughter.
And because we talked about sex toys, and there's so much to say about sex toys, and we didn't have enough time to talk all about them, because Good Vibrations asked me to please just wring out my brain like a sponge and put it in a book. And thanks to Char Ridner, without whom it would never have gotten organized, and her fabulous quizzes and tips that are in there. This is something that goes, I think, very well with Diana's book. I'm not trying to horn in on your.
No, I agree with you.
But I really feel that is the case. And finally, I promised you an offer, special offer. Have a look up in the right-hand upper corner, and you will see that there is a special offer that we're making available to people who have been on the call with us, to thank you for joining us and spending some of your time with us today. So please, if you want to avail yourselves of any of these terrific Pleasure Works toys, that's our house brand, and that means that we have been talking to customers for over 40 years about what they want. And then when we started to think about what we wanted to create for our brand, we had a lot of good feedback to go on. So hopefully there will be something in the Pleasure Works line that will please just about anybody that you can think of. And thank you very much, all of you, for being with us today at our very first conversation with Carol. I'm going to do this again with interesting people from time to time, and I hope you'll join us again then too. But biggest thanks to you, Dr. Diana Wiley, deardrdiana.com. Did I get it right this time?
You did. Thank you.
Please know that Dr. Diana is out there in Seattle holding down the fort with a few open spots in the therapy dance card, apparently, but also available via her website, and tune into her radio show too. She talks to terrific people and has such interesting conversations.
Thank you, Carol. I really appreciate you so much. We're friends and colleagues, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak today to at this event. It's great because, you know, the bottom line for me is to help people. I don't plan to retire, and God willing, I keep my marbles, and I think I will, because it's just so deeply satisfying to help people with their sexuality and have better. And I'm looking at Good Vibrations: explore, educate, empower. Those are that's very important, and that's what I do in my therapy too. So thank you again.
That's right. Well, everyone, stay safe, be well. Happy weird holiday season. Please tune in to both our website and Dr. Diana's for any additional shopping help, information, all of the above. We're so grateful to you for spending some time with us. And finally, Coyote Lisa, thanks a million. I couldn't have done this without you, and grateful to you too.
Thanks to you both.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.